So on March 17th, Donald Trump spoke in favor of hydroxychloroquine. Now, I had been talking to my peers for the previous 2 months. What do you think about hydroxychloroquine?
Yeah.
The response was, And I said, well, aren't you going to use it when you get your first COVID patient? And people are like, yeah, probably, I guess, I don't know. Incurious. Like nobody was reading, which I found weird. Okay, all right. March 17th, he gets pilloried for hydroxychloroquine. My next ER shift, oh my gosh, it was like, oh no, I'm never going to use that. That's terrible, that's dangerous, terrible stuff. And I looked at my peers, but they're my peers still. I didn't know what was coming. I was like, why? Like what, like last week you didn't care. Oh no, it's very bad, very dangerous. I'm like, why is it? And he starts saying whatever they heard on the news or on Facebook. And that was my lesson number 2. Wow, you're just incurious. You're literally like a Facebook. Like, why do people pay you as a doctor? Like, I didn't get it. Like, you were literally just saying what they said at a press conference. I thought it was weird that they went from not caring about hydroxy, no problem, to saying, oh, verboten. Now, a couple months,
well, that's sensitivity to, what would you say, reputation savaging. It's contagious, right? If you associate with someone whose reputation is being damaged, then it affects you.
So I hear what you're saying. That is a good point. That ER job where I was doing most of my work was in a politically kind of conservative area. It's where Kevin McCarthy is the congressman. So it wasn't like a hatred of Trump in that area, but the world had come down against hydroxychloroquine. And my doctors.
And why was that? Why did the world come down against hydroxychloroquine?
Oh, well, we know the answer now. We know the answer now.
Let's lay that out just briefly, and then we'll return to the story.
Right. So it was, first of all, in real time, it was bizarre. People coming out against it. It's 70 years approved by the FDA. It's completely benign across the world. It's over the counter, etc.
Oh, yeah. So those are the reasons.
Well, it turns out in America, to release the vaccine on an EUA, an emergency use authorization schedule, the prerequisite is that there's no other treatment available.
Oh, yeah. So that's the damning clause right there. If anything else worked that had been pre-approved, you couldn't do it.
By law, you would not able to release the Pfizer Moderna shots.
So what's the campaign then from the pharmaceutical companies? Like what orders go out to make hydroxychloroquine verboten?
Everything happened to hydroxychloroquine. So starting the middle of March 2020, it was like poison. You know, people were scared, people were rejected. Specific policies that I know you wouldn't know. CVS, the chain pharmaceuticals were instructing their pharmacists not to prescribe it. Like if a patient came in, the pharmacist would get a red box flashing on their screen to double, triple, quadruple check hydroxychloroquine safety. So pharmacists at the drugstore were being empowered to interfere with the practice of medicine, which in America is illegal. In America, pharmacist is only allowed to dispense and to clarify mistakes or dosage, or some kind of error, so they can clarify it. They're specifically by law not allowed to interfere with the doctor's decision. All day long, that's all they did. So if you found yourself a doctor who would prescribe it, the pharmacist blocked it. The hatred on hydroxychloroquine was huge. The World Health Organization came out. It was unbelievable. This is when I really learned how bad the science was. I'm sure you're familiar with the Lancet article that was retracted, or maybe not. We have different worlds.
Lay it out.
So Lancet is one of the 3 most famous medical journals in the world. And so if you say you're published in the Lancet, that is just career.
JAMA and British Medical Journal?
I would say those are the exact, or New England Journal of Medicine. And then maybe JAMA would be 4th. But it's like number 1, number 2 in the world. You don't get published in JAMA by accident. It's utterly impossible. There's committees, there's layers of
very hard.
It's very hard. I mean,
and it takes a long time.
Years,
usually.
And you have to be, you've coming from a prestigious university, and there's a team of people. And so I just want to be crystal clear, you cannot be published by accident in the Lancet. You have a team of researchers, you have a team of researchers who are approving it, you have an editorial board that's doing it.
And those are career-making publications.
Totally. You got published in the Lancet, you could then go off and be a professor, associate professor, et cetera. So this Lancet article comes out saying that hydroxychloroquine was, unsafe and ineffective for COVID. And the headlines from this Lancet study went all around the world. Everybody who was paying attention at the time read that study, and all of a sudden it was considered poison and terrible and awful. But independent researchers looked at the study and cried foul. It didn't make sense. The numbers of people they had in the study were in the tens of thousands. I think they said they had 60 or 70,000 people in the study. I'm not certain of the number. It crossed like 5 continents, hundreds of hospitals, and everyone's scratching their heads. They're like, how did we not hear about this study? And how did they compile data from all over these geographic locations in different languages in different countries, like so rapidly and da-da-da. So the independent physicians who became America's frontline doctors raised their hands, published online. They said, this doesn't make sense. And they complained. And so the Lancet got a little embarrassed. The Lancet goes to the authors and they said, show us the data, show us the proof. They could not prove it was authentic. They had no way to prove it. And the Lancet had to publish a retraction. I think it was only about 3 weeks. So kudos to the independent doctors who called foul. The Lancet had to retract it. I've never in my career seen that, where the Lancet retracted. It never happens. Now, do you think that the headlines from its retraction made worldwide news? They did not. Let me tell you what happened from the original Lancet study. The World Health Organization and studies all across the world on hydroxychloroquine's effectiveness in COVID were halted. They said, oh, you've got to stop doing them. It's very dangerous, ineffective. It was almost impossible to restart those studies again. It interfered. So, and the other thing is that the damage was done. The reputational damage to hydroxychloroquine was complete. Forevermore to this day, people think it's unsafe.
Definitely.
And that was what it was. And I witnessed this in real time. I'm watching.
So what's the effect on you?
So, well, I was the most, just on a personal level, I couldn't believe that my peers, who were more than capable of learning all of this, I was no more sophisticated than they were not paying any attention. And they simply followed the headline du jour. That's it. Oh, today, when the EUA for hydroxy was authorized, oh, we can use it today. And again, I said to my peers, what changed today? And they'll literally quote Facebook or a press conference. And so I learned that doctors were not curious, and I didn't understand why patients are paying most doctors, because you could get this stuff right off of Google or right off a committee hearing. And it was very demoralizing. The good part about the internet was I found many, many other independent doctors online.
Yeah.
And we all came together and we said, we've got to speak up about this. This is just terrible. We didn't know how because we were very censored. Anybody who put anything about hydroxychloroquine, if you had the word hydroxychloroquine in a tweet, you were taken out. So you'd find creative ways of writing. You'd write initials, people would get it, but you couldn't do it. But one by one, we found each other.
That was Twitter, Facebook, same problem?
100%. It was worse on Facebook than even Twitter. It was everywhere. But we all had a burning passion to say the truth, the independent doctors. So we found each other. And I would say maybe there was 100 that we found just all over, just people who just like me could not be silenced, couldn't stand it. And so I said, we've got to speak to the American people. And I also know America is the world. And so I just started reaching out to people and I started doing interviews and started getting my reputation attacked. And then I decided, you know what? I'm going to do something that was just going to put doctors in front of the world. I said, let's stand in front of the Supreme Court, because actually it was supposed to be the Capitol, but they couldn't. So we were in front of the Supreme Court. And I said, let me just bring YouTube influencers. That's what I called social media influencers. I said, let's bring some YouTube influencers and doctors, and we're just going to stand there.
Who would you bring? Who were the YouTube influencers?
I randomly called people. Yeah. So the biggest name was Breitbart News, which wasn't an individual. And then I think everybody else was just random influencers who just showed up. These are people who are upset.
With Breitbart, you're going to get the right-wing tag instantly too.
Right. But so we're just doing our thing. We doctors were giving education. We spoke for hours on the science. It's 78% identical and hydroxychloroquine is safe and all these things and policy. And then we did that in a room. But then we walked over to the Supreme Court. And I remember the Breitbart guy videotaping it, looked at his peer, and he said, we have 178,000 concurrent viewers. I have no idea what that means. And so I say to him, is that good? Is that bad? I have no idea. He's like, we've never had anything even 10% of that. I'm like, whoa, that's interesting.
Yeah, your life's over.
So I had no idea. We stand in front of the Supreme Court. I don't know if you ever saw it because it was taken down very quickly. But I said to the world, you just stop living in fear. There's no reason to live in fear. There's early treatment available if you should want it. Masks don't stop respiratory viruses. And, this is going to be fine. Let's not have lockdowns. We had about 12 doctors up there. Dr. Joseph Ladapo, our future Surgeon General. We had pediatricians. We had internists. We had orthopedists. A bunch of us, white coats, all of that. I had no idea that was going to completely upend my life. We were just speaking truth And that was July 27th, 2020.